now. Let's see if it works. Is it recording yet? Yes, it is. Awesome. Okay. Take it away, Dr. Campbell.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to spend some time with you all this evening and talk a little bit about academic medicine. My name is Kendall Campbell. I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the Brody School of Medicine, and I direct the research group for underrepresented minorities in academic medicine. So part of my role is looking at issues around recruitment and retention of underrepresented faculty and students in academic medicine. I'm a family physician. I have been practicing for about 16 years or so. The last 2 years, I've been doing mainly administrative work. My interest has been cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, and particularly care for the underserved. I ran a clinic, an interprofessional clinic for the underserved for a number of years, and that's kind of where my heart is when it comes to clinical care. What I want to do with you all tonight is really give you a little bit of insight into the world of academic medicine. I think academic medicine is a wonderful profession. And I think that you all, as you're finishing up your training in medical school, that you should consider it. But you should know the pitfalls, the advantages, and a little bit about how history has tried to dictate to you who you should be in medicine. And it's really important that I share these things. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go through a PowerPoint. Feel free to stop me and ask a question. And Carmen, if you could help me monitor the chat, if you want to put something in the chat, that'll be fine too. I really want this to be a dialogue with you guys. I don't want to be lecturing to you, but there's certainly some things that I want to be sure that I get across to you tonight, because if you're thinking about academic medicine at all, in any way, form, or fashion at all, even as you look at residency training programs, these are things that you need to know, and these are things that we've uncovered, if you will, in part of our research. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to go ahead and get started.
And students, as always, if you have like a personal private question that you want to ask, but not ask it directly, you can always message me and I'll ask it for you.
All right. So because I work at a medical school and I'm kind of formal in that way, I did put together a little PowerPoint presentation for you all. And again, I'll be introducing some terms to you that I've defined, that I'm working on getting into the literature, but just some things to kind of help you think about what your career could be as you think about academic medicine. So there are about 4 things we're going to do. I want to share with you kind of how I ended up in academic medicine, because it was not what was planned. It wasn't supposed to be, but it was, and that was 16 years ago, and I'm still in academic medicine. I want to introduce some concepts to you, and these are concepts that kind of came out of my head based on some of my research. One is called the gate blocking phenomenon, or gate blocking, as it pertains to, and you'll see a lot, URMM, and that's underrepresented minority in medicine. And I want to caution you guys right now, because you'll hear a lot of different acronyms and different terms, and a lot of times they try to take the M and replace it with an I. You'll hear URIM, underrepresented in medicine. And I kind of have a problem with that, because I'm a minority, and I've always been a minority, and I'm gonna be a minority tomorrow, and I'm gonna be a minority next week. So the I for me kind of takes a little bit of my identity away. I'm an underrepresented minority in medicine. I'm a Black man in medicine. And I think we need to think about who we are and who we represent, and not let the institution, if you will, begin to pick away at our identity. It's really important. The other thing we're going to do is talk about what I'm calling pseudo leadership, which happens a lot in academic medicine. What's going to be interesting, I hope, for you guys, is that some of the things that I'm sharing tonight are things that you probably have seen. Now, you may not have seen them at Meharry, and I love Meharry. I was just up there for a visiting professorship about a year ago, and spent some time with your dean and some other folks. Meharry was my first summer experience where I actually learned how to do some stuff in the lab. So then we're going to also discuss 4 ways or some thoughts that I have about how to approach this issue of gate blocking and this issue of what I'm calling pseudo leadership. So when you think about this thing, so for me, I really never intended to be an academic physician. I knew I always wanted to be a family physician. And the reason I was thinking about family medicine was because I wanted to be the family reunion doc, which means that I wanted to know a little bit about somebody's eye pain, somebody's blood pressure, somebody's toe issue, something happened to their arm. I wanted to know a little bit about some of everything. And I knew that as a family doc, I could do that. The other thing is I wanted to be able to work anywhere. So I'm from a really small town in Florida, and a town of about 7,000 people. And I wanted a profession in medicine that I could work in any size town that I wanted to, without having to be wedded to a tertiary care center, without being a subspecialist in a way that, you have to have a large environment to support your practice. So my intent was when I finished, when I went to medical school, was to go back to my hometown and open a private practice, and do a little bit of inpatient, outpatient medicine is what I intended. Well, while I was in medical school, I met my wife, and my wife decided that she wanted a second career. So when I was in medical school, she was finishing up her electrical engineering degree, her master's degree. And we talked about it, and she decided she wanted to be a veterinarian. So she decided to go to vet school. Well, the vet school where she decided to go happened to be the medical school I graduated from. And so I called some of my faculty and said, hey, my wife is coming to Gainesville and she's going to be starting the vet medicine program. Are there any openings at the school? I was just looking for something to do in Gainesville. And lo and behold, an opening came up at this interprofessional clinic, this clinic for the underserved, a faculty appointment. And so I kind of tripped into that appointment. It wasn't what I had intended, but I was able to onboard as a faculty member. And so what I did then was I taught medical students, third-year students, primarily in the clinic, did some lecturing too in the third year, and ended up doing some other things, which I'm going to talk about in this talk. But academic medicine was not a plan for me. And so as you guys think about your training, so if you're thinking about a rural practice, or if you're thinking about a community-based something, looking at programs that may be community-minded is something that's important to you. That's what I did, because I hadn't planned on being an academic physician. So I was looking at programs that were community-based, programs that were not affiliated with medical schools, programs that were not, linked to some big tertiary care or something. And it was important to me at the time that the program be unopposed. And what I mean by that is we were the only resident physicians in the whole hospital. So I didn't have to compete with internal medicine for patients in the ER at night. I ran all the codes. We were the resident physicians in the hospital, and there were no other resident physicians in the whole hospital. So we got a chance to work one-on-one with attending physicians, and it was really a nice experience where we got a chance to differentiate, if you will, and not have to be concerned about competing things. But I did that, and I went to a tertiary care center, academic health center, for a job. And you would think that those things wouldn't line up very well, but they did, because I was really supposed to be in an academic center anyway. And I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did. So
we have a question in the chat, and I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, so you may expand upon it, but it says, do you not worry about the lack of academic rigor in a purely community-based / non-academic affiliate program versus going to an academic program?
So it depends. It depends on what you're looking for in a practice. So if you're looking for academic rigor in the sense of, do your faculty in the program, have they published on some things? Are they scholarly? I mean, those are important things. If you are looking for a community-based community environment where you're the community doc, that might not be as important to you. So for example, so when I started my practice and I started working at this school, I read two journals. And those journals were the Journal of Family Practice and the American Family Physician. And the reason I read those journals was because they were written with the patient in mind. So very practical, very down to earth. All the cases I made for the medical students, I took from those journals. So if I was reading about hyperkalemia, it came out of one of those journals. Because in my mind, the practical aspect of delivering care was more important than the scholarly aspect of contributing to the body of knowledge of medicine. And I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit. So it really depends on where you see yourself ending up. And the good thing about it is, even if you do something that you didn't think you were going to do, you can equip yourself to do a really good job in that space if you are a lifelong learner and if you pick up some of these tips I'm going to share with you tonight. And Carmen, keep monitoring that chat because I can't see it with my presentation mode thing going on. I don't know when someone asks a question.
Okay.
So I ended up going to an academic medical center. And the challenge with that was, so when you're an underrepresented minority, people recognize that and they will give you a plan if you don't have a plan. So I didn't have a plan. And the reason I didn't was because I had never intended to be in an academic medical center. And so I'm a junior faculty member, and the way that works in academic medicine, when you start a program, you start as an assistant professor usually, or maybe a lecturer. And then as you progress, just like you guys are progressing through your medical training, you progress from assistant to associate and then to full professor. That's what's supposed to happen. So me, I came in July of 2004, fresh out of residency training, excited about clinical care, excited about getting my feet wet and getting started. And then I started in July, and then in October of that same year, I get approached by the dean's office about being an assistant dean in diversity affairs. Now, I'm gonna stop right there. Question to you guys. Do you think?
I'm like, wait, I'm sorry. I'm like, uh-oh, that's a trap. I'm just like, that's a trap. Just like,
now, see, now, Ashley, you knew that, but I didn't know that. So it was July I came at an academic center. Now, see, the difference is when you go to an academic center, there's an expectation that you should have of yourself. You don't go there just to teach. So don't get that all twisted up. If it's an academic center, you should go there to bring new knowledge to the body of medicine in whatever way you want to, whether it be, if hypertension is your thing, whatever, family medicine, diabetes, hep C, whatever. My thing happens to be minority faculty. But so that happened in October, and I was excited about it because I was like, wow, I'm 30 years old and I've only been working for a few months and they think I can be an assistant dean. So I started doing all these things. I see your head there, Ashley. So I started doing all these things that were dean-like. I had to go get me a dean car and I had to go look like the other deans at the school, but none of them looked like me. And the rest of them had already established who they were in academic medicine. And so that's the first lesson to you, and some of you already know this, is if you're thinking about a career in academic medicine, you have to establish yourself as an academician. What does that mean? You got to figure out who you're supposed to be in the academic space. I did not do that. I was just flattered by the fact that I got to go to these big meetings and sit in these rooms with these big people. And then I try to be big too and get me a doctor's car and get me a doctor's house and all this stuff. and it ended up being a big problem. Well,
What's an academician by, like, how do you define an academician?
so I define an academician as a physician who works in a medical school who has at least excelled in two of the three parts of an academic mission. So a medical school has three missions. One is to teach students, one is to provide clinical care, and the third is to do research. So if you're an academician, so for instance, if you go to a medical school and you are and you do nothing but see patients, you ain't an academician. So if you go and you're 100% employed by the school and 90% of the time you're seeing patients and 10% you're working with a couple of medical students, you ain't an academician.
Wow.
We're gonna go into this stuff because I want y'all to follow me. So in October, I was assistant dean. I was riding. I was assistant dean. Well, time passed. Now, mind you, when you're assistant dean, you're doing different things than you really should be doing. I'm gonna get to that. But then what happened? If you look at my picture, there came this opportunity for me to be the medical director of this practice. Now, being the medical, so I was the medical director of this practice, which is administrative role, and I was assistant dean, and I was seeing patients most of the time. So just keep that in it, put a pin in that, because we're gonna come back to that because it's really important for you as we go through.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can I ask about this?
Come on,
yeah. So, okay, so I have a lot of questions. So that's like 3.5, maybe 4 jobs.
That's right.
You have the salary of how many jobs at that time?
Come on, Ashley, come on. I had the
Because
salary.
that's exactly what I was trying to calculate when you said you bought your dean's car and your dean's house, and then
But you got a dean's salary. Okay, so
that's what I was thinking too. So thank you.
So as a physician, you're gonna make enough money to do that. But this is another lesson, but not for this talk. They're gonna throw money at you. So it didn't mean that I had the liquidity of the money. It meant I had credit. Y'all better hear me today. It meant I had credit.
We are.
So at one point in my life, and my wife can hear me talking about this, at one point in my life, I was paying $1,500 a month in car note. I saw your eyes, Janet. I saw that. I was paying for 3 cars at one time. I was paying for this 911 that I bought. I was paying for this pickup truck that had a TV in that I bought, and I was paying for my wife's car at the same time. And I went and signed my name on this big old house that I ain't have no business signing my name on, that they had to foreclose on because I couldn't afford to pay for it. Y'all better hear me today. Couldn't afford to pay for the house. They had to foreclose on the house because I couldn't pay for it. Had to sell the cars. But let me keep going because.
Okay, but the salary though. So did you or didn't you get more salary?
So the way that works is you do get more salary, but it doesn't amount to a whole lot. So what happens is you're one whole FTE, you're 100%. So if you start doing associate dean work or assistant dean work for 25% of the time, you're still going to be 100%. Now, 25% of your salary comes from the dean's office and you don't have to earn it in the clinic. Do you see how that works? Okay, so whenever you get a job, you will be an academic job. You will have a 100% job, okay? Now that job can be split up over those 3 parts I told you, clinical, teaching, and research. Well, the 4th bucket is administration. And so whatever other buckets you have, those buckets pay that part of your salary. So if you're regularly 100%, and you have a 25% diversity dean job, then that 25% is going to come from the dean's office for your salary. That other 75% is going to come from your clinical care from you seeing patients. So you still 100%. So you may or may not get an increase. Does that kind of make sense to you? Okay. So when I looked at myself, it's almost like when I came to myself, there were these weights that were floating around me. So there was this administrative stuff. There was the community, because I love the community. I was in the community all the time, giving lectures, going to people's churches and talking at the community center. Everybody knew Dr. Campbell. I was all over the place. And then I had this assistant dean thing. And so what was happening was, it was starting to press on me, because I was getting to the place that I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up with the community work. I mean, the clinic, the stuff was just, because the clinic, I'm gonna talk about the clinic and who they assign us to in clinic. We'll talk about that. But what happened was, I met with my department chair, and I was so pleased with the work I had done, because I was running this clinic. I was assistant dean. All the community talks I did, I had evaluations for. So my talks on hypertension, my talks on kidney disease, I made handouts, I drew diagrams, I had pictures, I had all that stuff. I had evaluations.
Pictures like your PowerPoint, huh? Pictures like the PowerPoint. You ready?
Yeah, so I had all this stuff, right? So I go in with my evaluation with my department chair, and I'm sitting there looking at him, and I'm like, I did a good job this year. I'm doing good. And he tells me, well, you're behind on your scholarship. You don't have it. You don't have any articles. You have any scholarly works. You have anything. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm the director of the clinic. I got what you mean I don't have anything? So that's when the light bulb came on, and I realized that in order for me to advance in the field, oh, y'all got to hear me today. Y'all please hear me today. In order for me to advance in the field, there's some things that I got to do that I was not doing because I was so busy being who they wanted me to be. And nobody, when I took that diversity job, my department chair and the senior diversity dean, none of them came to me and said, Kendall, you ain't been here a hot minute yet. How you think you're gonna be somebody's diversity dean? Go sit
Have a
down
seat.
over there.
Have a seat.
Go over there and sit down and be a family doc. Figure out what that means for you. Figure out your area of interest as an academic physician. Get some roots in that. Achieve the level of academic rank you're interested in, and then look for some sort of administrative something. Ain't nobody told me none of that. And I really don't fault them for it, because I don't think they rightfully knew. And that's part of the challenge. So if you look at the data, I want to get ahead of myself. If you look at the data, minority faculty leave academic medicine after about 5 years, because they've gotten fed up with it and they can't take it no more, because the institution tries to tell us who they want us to be. I'm sorry if I get a little preachy in this. I get a little worked up, get a little animated with it a little. So I'm sorry about that. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
Is that reason enough though? Because these are the same things that I worry about. Like, yes, there's an immense amount of power and opportunity, and you can engage, you can do things as a family doc that you wouldn't be able to do elsewhere. But this concept of balancing and carrying this unnecessary weight is what even makes me nervous about not just training in an academic center, but pursuing this as a career. And so I wonder, like, knowing what you know, do you still look med students in the eye and tell them that, like, this is what they should go into?
You see how happy I am. I'm gonna get to the end of my story. But so Kelly, so really what I'm talking about transcends discipline. So whether you're a family doc or an internist or OBGYN or a surgeon or whatever, this right here is the life of the academic minority family physician. But by the time we're done, you will have been equipped as to how to navigate this thing, and you will know what the games are, so that you'll be able to navigate the space should you decide it's something you want to do. I hope that helps you a little bit. Okay, so if you can look at me in this picture, I was having a hard time. I was just really having a hard time. And so I said, you know what? They can have this. and the way it happened, it was so good. So I was trying to see the clinic, was underserved. So, we had a whole lot of Medicaid and uninsured. And I'm directed the clinic. So I'm trying to have clinic meet the bottom line. Now we got to try to make the bottom line. So I'm triple booking my 8 a.m. appointments, I'm booking like 17, 18 people in the morning because I know and I'm director. So I made all the providers overbook by no-show rate. So the no-show rate was 20%. I would ask you to overbook your clinic by 20%. I'll never forget it. That morning I went in and one of my patients was in the parking lot and I was talking to him in the parking lot. And then I got in and all 3 of my 8 o'clocks were there. So that put me behind. And I had this Indian patient, very stoic patient. I walked into his room and I was apologizing. I said, I'm so sorry, I'm late. Everybody showed up this morning. I apologize. I know I'm 30 minutes late, blah, 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 blah. And he looked at me, he said, Dr. Campbell, you're killing yourself. And then he said, and if you leave here, this clinic will run just like it did when you weren't here. It will not miss a beat. And you will have worked yourself to whatever's left. Mm-hmm. And so when that light came on, then I realized that I was being who academic medicine said minority docs should be. And once I realized that, then I started to kind of shift gears and change my focus. The challenge was, I'm an academic doctor. So, and I knew that. So I knew I couldn't leave academic medicine and be fulfilled in private practice because I knew I didn't want to see patients all day, every day. I don't want to do that. I just knew I didn't want to do that. So I had to figure out how to make academic medicine work for me. So what I started doing was studying academic medicine, particularly through the lens of how it impacts underrepresented minority faculty and underrepresented minority students. And part of my mission in my role now is to educate folks like y'all around this stuff so that if you decide you want to venture into this thing, you go in with your eyes wide open and you can know what to expect and know what the institution is going to try to do to you. So that's part of the thing. So where this led to for me was trying to define the taxes that impact minority faculty. That's what I was. So I was trying to figure out what were the taxes. And so this is a paper that me and my colleague published in 2015. I would highly encourage you, if you have any thought at all, look me up in PubMed, find this paper, and read the guts of this paper, and it will tell you, it will give you in detail what you need to be thinking about. What you need to be thinking about when it comes to minority faculty. Now I'm gonna go through some of these in detail, and then I'm gonna kind of wrap some of these pieces together. So these are the 6 things that we find that minority faculty and minority students deal with that our non-minority counterparts do not. First one is racism, right? And not just racism, but institutional racism, individualized racism, and internalized racism. Now, and I can tell you that the racism that exists in the society at large, because there's people in society, them same people in the academic center, and them same people in private practice and in other settings too. So you got to recognize racism and how racism exists. I'm gonna give you an example of institutional racism and how it was designed to keep a brother down. So listen to this example. So I had enough sense to keep track of my performance when it came to teaching and those sort of things. So I had all my teaching evaluations, and I would highlight what the students would say about me, and because I learned, this after the light came on, I learned that I need to show excellence. If I want to get promoted, I had somebody ask me, why would I want to be promoted? Y'all better hear me tonight. Y'all better hear what I'm saying to you tonight. In order to be promoted, you got to show excellence in 2 of those 3 areas: clinical, education, scholarship. So I had great teaching evals from my teaching of medical students. But you know what I didn't have? I ain't have no teaching awards. So now I'm trying to figure out why I got these good evals and I don't got no teaching award. But bad English, good point. So I go to my dean and I say to him, and you got to do it the right way. I say to him, I said, and I brought my evals. I said, can you look at this and tell me what I'm doing wrong? I mean, what do I need? Why is it that I'm not being recognized as an exemplary teacher and standing up with you and getting my plaque with my, with these other folks? So long story short, let me tell you how it was institutional racism. In order for you to get a teaching award, remember I told you before that when you work at an academic center, you have teaching, you have research, and you
have to be nominated.
Well, nope. No, it's worse than that. So you get a percentage of time for what you do. In order to get a teaching award, your teaching percentage, or FTE, full-time equivalent, your percentage of teaching time has to be 25%.
But they kept that clinic.
Wait, no, and you were the dean or something?
Hey, that's right. Oh, yeah. So wait, you hear me? It had to be 25%. My time was 24%. So I could never get a teaching award. I don't care how good my teaching evaluations were because I didn't have the appropriate FTE to qualify for a teaching award. No matter how good I taught, no matter how hard I tried to put PowerPoints together for y'all, no matter how hard I made cases out of those journals I told you about, and I was teaching at the dry erase board and talking about heart failure, I'd never get a teaching award. But you can't get promoted. Oh, y'all better hear me today. If you ain't got a teaching award, you can't show access in the area. And so I had to fight to get my teaching percentage adjusted from 24% to 25%, so that I could at least get on the roster of people who could be recognized to get a teaching award. That is institutional racism. That is intended to keep me from getting a teaching award. And I'm gonna go into all this in a little. I'm gonna get down.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I ask a question? How would you say it's institutional racism as opposed to your naivety, or you just you're the one who accepted it's public knowledge, right? Or no?
It's institutional racism because the institution decided what my FTE was, and I didn't know no better. See.
But is it published? But I'm saying, like, is it published? Like, like how you knew? Like, was it written some? You know what I mean? Like, they're like, oh, well, it's right here in this document in the bottom of the basement in a box.
No, they don't know. No, and you'll find out if you try to look for promotion and tenure documents at your school, it might be different at Meharry. You ain't gonna hardly find anything. You're gonna find some vagueness, because what ends up happening is it becomes a manipulation of you as a minority faculty member. That's what it becomes. It becomes how do we get Ashley to be who we want her to be in the department and do what we want her to do? Never mind what her talents and gifting is for the field of medicine, how we can identify those and help develop those. And don't we think that she wants to be promoted? So why wouldn't we have a promotion discussion with her at her time of hire? These are things that I didn't know. So let me keep going.
I just want to, because I know you can't see the chat, Kelly has actually cited your paper.
Oh, she has?
Yes. She has actually cited your paper. So
yeah, In an institutional work group that was formed after the murder of George Floyd at my school, we demonstrated a list of demands on behalf of Black students, as many schools did. And in that, a task force was formed. They were like, okay, fine, here's some protected time, go figure it out. And we're like, cool, thanks. And in that, we had a subgroup specifically on the minority tax. And when we tried to find an establishing definition to make that make sense to our non-minority administration, cited your paper.
Oh, keep it up, keep it up.
Yeah, so like that's why these concepts, these disparities are so intimidating, because they're like felt in very real ways, even as trainees. And you have this internal moment of like, but I could be the person to like change a lot of these institutional happenings. I could be the person to finally be a mentor for the students like me. I could be the person to finally address some of these issues from within the boardroom instead of outside of it. But then you look at these issues, right, and you get intimidated.
Yeah, but Kelly, I tell you, just seeing you guys tonight is like, I'm like stoked, because whenever, and I would say that this kind of work is it's a calling in it. I mean, I think that, like when I said inherent in me as an academic person, I mean, I don't get drive like this when I'm standing at the bedside trying to figure out what somebody's IV fluid rate is supposed to be. I don't get that. I don't get that when I write about, malabsorption or something, but I get that when I talk to you guys. And I get that when I'm putting those papers together. And we just published one in JAMA that projected the number of African-American graduates that would have been produced if they hadn't closed all the Black medical schools. You ought to read that one. Woo! Anyway, so let me finish. Let me keep going. So isolation, and y'all know what isolation is. Isolation means you the only one in the room. And because you're the only one in the room, the environment is not one that is conducive to what your interests are. They might not even ask you what you think about things. So part of this is for you. So when you think about your first job, knowing that you read the minority tax, you can ask your future employer, the literature says that minority faculty are isolated in academic medicine. Can you tell me what your institution is going to do to help keep me from being isolated? And then you listen. But those are things, this is how you get equipped, because then you can really find out those sort of things. Mentorship. So mentorship, the literature says we don't get mentorship. We don't get mentorship, we don't get faculty development. And the reason why we don't is because academic medicine wants to tell you who they want you to be. And as long as you conform to who they want you to be, then things work well for them and you kind of get used up in the process. And when I say used up, you may work for them for 30 years, but you won't earn the money you should have earned because you never got promoted. You won't contribute to the body of knowledge of medicine like you could have, because no one ever invested in you as a faculty member. Clinical disparity. Underrepresented minorities do more clinical work than non-underrepresented minorities. Do you wonder why that is? Well, that is because the whole notion, if you go back to Flexner and you read this paper I just told you about, the whole notion was that Black doctors would be taking care of minority, poor, underserved Black patients so that other doctors would not have to. So the whole goal in this is to get you to be a clinician only, not to do anything else that would require you to study something or develop a project or develop an idea. None of that. It was to put the stethoscope in a place and prescribe things in a place to take care of a subset of the population that they don't want to take care of. And so that's why there is a clinical disparity, and that clinical disparity creates the promotion disparity, because if you're in the community all the time, like me, if you're seeing patients all the time, like me, if you're doing these other things, then you aren't doing the things that the institution values for promotion and advancement. So that's why you'll see in some other stuff I've written that minority faculty are in tenure and tenure earning tracks less often, that they're more often at the assistant professor level and don't get promoted, that they're not in leadership positions. And the reason why is because academic medicine has sequestered them away to prevent them from growing in leadership. And many times we just don't know because nobody told us. We just happy we just got a job, and that's part of what we do. And don't let me get ahead of myself, but that's the promotion disparity. And then this last one, all y'all know about this last one, the diversity efforts or diversity pressures disparity, where they come to you. I know they're coming to you now, and they want you to give them the answers for what to do, you know, given George Floyd's death. You know, what do we do? You know, and this burden that students and faculty that look like us have to want to try to right our environments. We want them to be right. But the very people who are impacted the most by this are the people they come to fix it. And no. It's got to be fixed at the administrative level from the top down. The reason these things persist is because the leaders in academic medicine make it so, and they're gonna have to be the ones to change it. When I took my diversity dean job, when I came up here to North Carolina and I started working in the diversity office, I told the dean that I had an office of influence. I said, I ain't got no office of power. I don't hire faculty. I mean, I can't control how many underrepresented minority faculty a school has. I don't hire faculty. I don't evaluate them. I don't hire them. And then I added to that, I won't be responsible for their numbers because I don't, that's not what I do. I'm an office of influence. I'm not an office of power. I don't have faculty lines. I can't hire faculty. But the challenge is we end up being on the website. We end up being the ones that they call for the meeting, and it ain't but a handful of us, so it's every meeting. So these are what we call diversity pressures, and what these pressures will do is they will keep you from advancing in academic medicine as a physician. As a student, what they will do is they can cause you to flunk your anatomy exam.
Oh,
and
yes,
so,
no, we already know. I think we've already.
So I tell students when they come, when you all come to me and say, Dr. Campbell, we saw what was going on and we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this. The first thing I say to you is, I need for you to get your MD degree. And I don't want anything to happen to derail you from that. And then we can figure out what we're going to talk about. But the main thing is, did you study your pharmacology last night? What was you, because at the end of the day, you didn't create this. They're just looking to you to fix it. And that's what happened to me in October of 2004 when I took that diversity job and was just as green behind the ears as anybody, but they saw me and figured that, oh, wow, we can have a Black man in this role. He can help us recruit students to the medical school. And by the time it was over, I had this ickiness about me about recruiting students to a school that I knew didn't support me, you know, as an academic physician.
They just want to look like they care about it. Like they're like, oh, we see how many colored students we have. Yes, we're doing this, but they don't want to actually do the things or make the changes to make it a welcoming place to students of color, faculty of color, anybody.
Right. So let me keep going because there's some more meat in this I want y'all to get to. So the difference in this, and this is the picture out of the Minority Tax article, is in addition to the research requirements and the teaching and the service, the clinical stuff we do, on top of that are these disparities or taxes that add a whole nother level of weight to the work that we do. And the way that you guys are going to be armed with this is, if you decide to take this academic job, the first question that you got to ask is, where is my supported time for scholarship, for development as an academic physician? Where is that? Who is my mentor? And it can't just be your department chair. I mean, even if they have to do, you know, even if it has to be an interinstitutional mentoring relationship where they put you in touch with Dr. So-and-so at school so-and-so, who is that? You know, and you need to be able to say, I don't want to serve on that committee because that's a diversity efforts disparity. That's a diversity disparity. You know, you all need to hire more underrepresented minority faculty is what you all need to do. You know, so this, what this does is it arms you and gives you advice to help you think about how to navigate this thing. And so what these things have created for us, and I would encourage you to have your faculty read, I got a paper that talks about the net, releasing the net for minority faculty success, is these things, they're not in silos. These things work together, and they work together to bind us, if you will, and keep us stagnated or in the same place in academic medicine. So we talked about the minority tax. The gratitude tax is, you just so thankful to have a job. Oh, I'm just so thankful to have a job, that you don't question anything and you don't think that you can move. And that's what happens to us so many times. And you all need to think about that. When you hit that glass ceiling, there will come a time in the academic space where you may outgrow your institution. Don't allow your institution to hold you back. And don't be afraid to look for opportunities outside of your current academic environment. There's so many people that don't do that and they stay under that glass ceiling. And the problem with that is time continues to pass. So if you stay an assistant professor for 30 years, do you think you ever gonna be somebody's dean? No, because junior faculty members, junior faculty rank people ain't deans. They usually ain't department chairs. They usually aren't leaders. And now you've worked in at this rank for 20 years, longer than you should have, because you never did do those things that you needed to do to advance in the profession. Imposter syndrome, I don't have to define that at all. Y'all know what that is. Y'all know what imposter syndrome is, right? Imposter syndrome is when you feel like you ain't got no business being there, but you qualified to be there and you should.
So,
yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
I have a question. Since I like your development of new terminology, I would like for you to additionally add something, because now everybody is using imposter syndrome when they are just feeling nervous. And I just think that there's a little bit more, and there's some distinction that should be made, because even in like residency, so like as an intern, right, everyone's like, oh, you have imposter syndrome in a way because you feel like you're not qualified to be an intern, but you clearly are. So like it's kind of technically that, but in the way that it's set up, and by definition, when we created it, it's to reflect an area where you're perpetually taught to feel like you're inadequate, not that you feel inadequate in this way today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you there. I hear you there. And you're right. I mean, it's part of again, it's part of a narrative, right? You buy into the narrative. And so this is just meant to illustrate that these things work together, and that they're not siloed, and that they work together in their effect to impact the progression of minority faculty. I'll give you a key example of power distance. So in my role, I'm the senior associate dean, which means I'm over admissions, medical education, student affairs, several offices. Well, there's one person between me and the dean. The vice dean is between me and the dean. The vice dean's a white man and the dean's a white man. And so I wanted to speak to the dean one day about something. So I walked into his office and his administrative assistant was there. So I walked in and I saw his administrative assistant, and I sat down and I said, well, can you let me know if Dr. Stacy has a moment? Because I wanted to ask him a question. And I sat down and I waited for her to do what she was doing. The vice dean, who's a white man, walks into the room and sees me sitting there and says, well, Kendall, what are you doing? I said, well, I need to talk to Mark about something. He said, why don't you just walk on in there? So I don't just walk in there, because I can't just walk in there like that. Just like he can walk in there like that, because there's a whole set of things that go into what I do, and there's a microscope that analyzes my every action, my every thought when I'm in a meeting. I mean, there's some folks that could blow up in meetings and hit tables and yell and scream. I can't do any of those things. So that's where this whole power distance kind of comes into play, and it impacts us, and it impacts psychological safety. Do you feel safe enough in your environment to say what's on your mind? Or do you not, because you have concern that what you say might be used against you, may be misconstrued in some way, and could impact your longevity as a faculty member at this institution, or even as a student? So those are some things that we think about that are interwoven, that impact existence. So what we had defined, if you will, is we were on this hamster wheel. So I was on this hamster wheel, and I was just running as hard as I could, doing all these different things, but they weren't valued by the institution for advancement. And so there are these things that are valued, and you have to figure out how to take what you enjoy and format it into a way that the institution values it. And these are some things that the institution values. I mean, they value grants, they value pubs, they want you to have a national presence. These are things that kind of go into where we need to go. And so what happens is we almost need where's my other picture? Oh, I'm missing a picture. Where's my picture? This picture is in the wrong place. So what we're looking for is a way to get up out of this rat race, and these are things that help us do that. So publications help us do that, because a publication will go with you wherever you go, whatever institution you work at. That thing with your name on it will go with you wherever you go. Grants, being known nationally for the work that you do. So nobody's calling me now because I wrote for Norvasc for somebody, for a blood pressure pill. Nobody's calling me. Now, there are some folks that are called about hypertension. Folks call me about minority faculty and minority student issues. And so I have a national presence in that space, promotion and tenure. So there's got to be a way that you figure out how to take the things that you do and convert them into things that the institution values for promotion. And what we find is that underrepresented minority faculty, canaries in the coal mine. Whatever helps us helps everybody. It raises all boats. It helps the institution. I mean, so really, if you think about that, by helping the underrepresented faculty at the institution, everybody benefits. Let me go back to my other slide.
And we also have a question in the chat too. And it's about what happens when you get all of this, but the institutions realize that they can't turn you into what they want you to be.
Well, that's the thing. So then either if you're happy where you are, then you continue to churn and crank with what you do. So if you have a department chair or a leader in academic medicine, the way academic medicine works is you have a dean of the school, and then you'll have a family medicine department. So you'll have a departmental home. You'll be a faculty member in department. If your faculty member is leaving you alone, and you can work out your promotion and your papers and who you are in other ways, then that's fine. But if not, then you need to find another institution to go to. The good thing about the way the situation is now is we got Zoom, we got internet, so you can have a mentor at another institution who's reviewing papers with you, who's providing you advice, who you run things by, and you can stay where you are. But my caution to you is you don't want to stay where you are if you've hit a ceiling and you know there's more in you, but the institution, because of institutional politics and that kind of thing, you can't advance. So this slide right here means so much to me, because this is what happens to us so often. It's almost as if the institution would be the giraffe. And so it's almost as if the institution wants us to be who they want us to be. They want us to be them. I was trying to be like the other deans. Well, the problem was I wasn't supposed to be giraffing. I was supposed to be lioning. And so there was a talent in me for scholarship and writing and projects, and Wasn't nobody investing in that. So I worked for 8 years as a family doc before anybody said to me, you know, Kendall, you actually did a pretty good job of thinking through that. You ever tried to write a paper? I bet you could put a good paper together. And that in 2012, I lost 8 years. In 2012, that was what was the motivation. It was a white guy who told me that and said, you could have a center. You could publish this work. You have ideas. This is great. You should contribute in this way, as opposed to just your clinic session starts at 8 a.m. Or don't be sure, you know, you only got an hour for lunch before you go back. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you just don't want the profession to define who you want to be in this space. And this is the challenge in this is a lion has ability. Now, when you put a lion on stilts, you've taken away his hunting ability, you take his power, you try to form him, make him, and that's what tends to happen a whole lot. So let me tell you about these terms. So what do I mean when I say gate blocking? So for faculty, it means that minority faculty and non-minority faculty, they're both on the same side of this gate. And this gate is what provides access to promotion and tenure, which is advancement, leadership opportunities, other opportunities. But the problem is because of the minority tax, because of institutional racism and privilege systems, we can't make it through the gate. And the challenge with it is, if you listen to academic medicine, they'll tell you it's something wrong with us. Ain't nothing wrong with you. You're in a system that's designed to inhibit your success. But what happens is we get told that we don't read enough, or we aren't capable to do so and so, or we don't think like a scholar, or we don't do this, or we don't do that. When many times it's not us, it's the environment that we're in. And if we don't recognize, you know, how we can begin to navigate that environment, then we will succumb to really being who they call us to be. And don't misunderstand me. There are people who've done that, who've worked in academic medicine for 30 years and are just as happy as they can be. And that's fine. I just want you all to work to the top of your ability and for you to be who you want to be in the space. And that's really important. And so what does this do in terms of faculty, and what does this do in terms of learners? So I talked about faculty a little bit, more clinic, less scholarship, more community. We talked about those things, but for you all, you get biased career advising. And I don't know how many of you all have experienced some of this that even gender bias. You know, you can't be an orthopedic surgeon. You don't you want to be a pediatrician? So you get this biased career advising, isolation we talked about, and then this whole notion of the hidden curriculum. We say we do one thing, but really you're getting this lesson or something else is really going on. And then we talked about diversity pressures, and we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome. But all of these things block the gate. So when I realized the issues that I was dealing with around my teaching evals and all of the community work and all of the committee work, and it's good work, but it was blocking my advancement. It was blocking me from getting promoted. And it's a huge deal because the difference between assistant professor and associate can be anywhere from 8 to 10% salary increase. So if you stay at this, it's just like a good example would be you come to medical school, you do first year, and you just stay in first year for the next 30 years. You don't advance. So the academic space is just like a school. You're supposed to advance in the ranks as an academic person, just like you do as a medical school student. So I put this graphic together based on Kurt Lewin's model of change to show or to say that we need minority faculty to not just be clinicians only. And those of us who work in academic centers have to begin to change and begin to think about how do I become a scholar? Meaning you may go to clinic. And so in clinic, you may see a whole lot of people with hypertension that's related to medication non-adherence. So how could you put together a project to assess what the adherence, what the problem is with adherence? Is it that they can't afford their medicine? Is it that they, if they can't get to the pharmacy, what is it? And then design a project, work that project or employ that project, and then evaluate it. Now you've figured out a problem that you've had. You've used a system to define it and figure out what the problem, what's going on. And then once you figure out what the results say, then you can change the behavior. That should happen in every area of medicine, including issues around underrepresented minority faculty and minority students. And that's why it's bigger than just where you put the stethoscope. And it's not what academic medicine intended for you to be or do. So what was it that I learned in this? So I learned that there was nothing wrong with me doing clinic the way I did. There was nothing wrong with enjoying the work of the community and the assistant dean work, but I learned that I needed to turn that work into scholarship. And I fought that a little bit first because I'm thinking the work itself should merit, advancement. But there's something about the rigor of taking an idea, designing a project, collecting data, getting those data analyzed, and coming to a conclusion. And you can do that with community work. You can do that in the clinical space. You can even do that with your dean level administrative work. So you can format that work into a way that the institution values it. And what happens is it becomes available for people to read, just like Kelly saw the minority tax paper. It becomes available to help people other places. I had to figure out this service time. So if you want to pursue research or you want to pursue grants, you need to figure out, how much service you need to do. And there are ways to navigate this. So when you're armed with this information, you can have conversations with your chair. You can say things like, I'm interested in this, but not right now. I would like to do this for a couple of years to get my feet under me and learn who I am in academic medicine. And then I might be interested in the medical directorship of this practice or the course director role or the whatever. And then certainly when you think about these administrative roles, really try to be where you want to be in terms of your rank before you take them. Because if you take one, you got to figure out how to keep that line of scholarship moving while you're serving as an administrator. So that's the reason why I run this research group. And that's the reason why you'll still see me cranking out articles, because even as a senior level administrator at the institution, I got to keep cranking these papers and keep adding to the body of knowledge of medicine, because that's my currency, if you will, for the work that I do. So let's talk about pseudo leadership, because I don't know if y'all have heard of what this is going to be defined as, but I want to talk about this. This is being transitioned into a leadership position for diversity's sake, but you're not ready for the leadership position because of racism and the minority tax and these things that have sequestered you away from being developed to lead. And what it does is it positions you, it puts you in a position of manipulation by senior leadership, and it makes it where you can't mentor those coming behind you. I give you a good case in point. I met with a senior leader several years ago. This was a senior leader at the school, very prominent person, and I couldn't get this blood pressure study to do right. I was trying to randomize pay, it just was not working right. And I went to this person, it was a person of color, and I went and I said to this person, I'm having problems with my trying to do this randomized controlled trial. I need help. Can you help me explain? I mean, can you help me? And her eyes got big and they glazed over, and I got nothing out of that exchange. And the reason I did was because she was a pseudo leader. And what you'll find out in that is pseudo leaders tend to have that role for a really long time. And the reason why is because they're unable to transition into, I mean, nobody's coming to pick them off to be the head of the NIH or the head of the, because they don't have the scholarship background, they don't have the foundation. It's great that they have the opportunity, but it's a point of manipulation, and it's a point where they don't have the knowledge to make decisions of their own accord or even know what was going on. So that's what was going on with me. I was a pseudo leader. I thought I was really doing some great stuff, and I was doing some great things, but I was being manipulated, if you will, by the institution and by some of the leaders. I remember when the light came on after I talked to that patient, I began to think, I need to be writing articles. I need to be advancing the field of medicine. I work at a medical school. I shouldn't just be seeing patients all the time. I need to be doing these other things. And I read this article about minority faculty and faculty development, and I took it to my one of the senior leaders, white guy at the school. And I remember handing him that article. It was in JNMA, and I handed it to him. And I remember him looking up at me, and I can see his face now. And the face, the look that I got was, oh man, he knows. It was kind of like the face of, he knows. He knows. And so whenever you know, then you become a problem, because now you're pushing up against the norm. You're asking questions and you're trying to figure out.
Wait, I'm sorry. Repeat it again. I think I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So the point I was making was, so when the light came on and I began to realize that I work at a school, I should be doing scholarly things. And once I realized that, I started reading some articles. I started trying to educate myself, and I found this article. You think the school is, you think the school just, they don't know, and they want to support all of that, and they're excited about that. So I read this article, and I took it to one of the senior leaders, one of the white gentlemen, senior leaders, senior level dean, and I handed it to him, and I said, look at what I'm learning about minority faculty. And he looked up at me, and the look that I got, I can see it right now. The look that I got was, he knows. He knows. So now that he knows, he's going to be looking to find projects, to write papers, to do scholarship. He's going to be looking to figure out how to advance his career. When I first started there, you know what they told me? They told me, we want you to be the Martin Luther King of the clinic. And when they told me that, when I first started, I was like, wow, what a wonderful thing for somebody to say. And then I thought later, I said, man, they shot Martin. So you begin to think, so am I selling my career for what they want me to do? And then I had one of them say to me, well, Kendall, why would you want to get promoted? I mean, why would you even want to be promoted? Why would you want to do that? Why are you interested in trying to advance? Why, in other words, phenotypically, see, your nose is too wide for you to want to do something else. Your lips are too thick for you to want to do something other than see patients all the time, and specifically see the patients that I don't want to go see. Because I need for you to go to that underserved clinic down there, because people don't take no baths, and they ain't took care of their feet, and I need for you to go down there and see them, because I don't want to see them. I want to see my white collar workers who are my lawyers and my teachers and my nurses and dentists, but I don't want to see anybody who's uninsured and who has a hard time making ends meet, and who may, maybe illiterate, or I don't want to do that. So the message in this is, you've got to realize that if you work at a school, then you should be scholarly. You should be bringing forward new knowledge. And as I've learned about this, is we got to recognize that before you even come out of this, that they've already decided that you can't be scholarly. The institution has decided that you can't come up with research ideas or projects, that you can't execute a rigorous a project and get a data set and have it analyzed and be able to come to some conclusions, that we're phenotypically incapable of doing that because we operate from this white normal of privilege, and we just aren't capable of doing that. So no one even thinks to even offer you or even suggest to you, hey, why don't you want to co-author this paper with me? Or hey, I got this idea, that I want to implement this in the clinic, and I got this idea, come work with me on this project. We can do a lit review and pull a few articles, and we can figure out what the latest in the literature says about this, and maybe we can figure this out. But that's never been where we have been. And it's because the institution of academic medicine has always intended for us to be clinician-only thinkers, not research scientists, not scholarly folks, not folks who are bringing forward new knowledge.
Worker bees.
Yeah, worker bees. And so, but the other message I want you guys to get tonight is a terminal degree is not an endorsement of your ability, and it is not, let me put that in bold, it is not an invitation to meeting. Do you hear me? So in other words, you get your MD, but in many times the institution sees a slave MD. So just because I remember thinking that I've graduated from medical school, it's going to be smooth. I knew it's going to be some things to work on, but it's going to be smooth sailing from here. I'm going to have my MD degree. I can see patients. I can help folks. And I thought that was the end all be all. But it's not. There's another space. There's another realm where there's a place where you can invent and create and design and innovate and share creativity in medicine with the world. But you gotta break hold of that frame of the limits of who they say that you can be. So preparing how to get a spot at the decision-making table. Where does the money come from? How does the money flow for what this project is going to be? Who's funding this? Preparing to mentor others. So thinking about, medical students coming behind you all, sharing this information, sending folks to the minority tax paper and other papers that can help them understand kind of how this works. And then shifting from the disparity thinking where white is the normal and white is the goal to more of an equitable thinking, trying to make sure that folks get what they need to be successful. I put this duck on here just a kind of a silly thing as a talk that I give, because the wielders of power will want you to stare at the duck, and what staring at the duck means, it means you caught, you churning, you working, but you're stuck in this place, and there may be more in you for the field of medicine, and so what happens is the field of medicine is robbed of your intellect, because we don't get to experience all that you have to offer, because there's more in you than just where you put your stethoscope. And until somebody can recognize that and mentor you and help you see your own talent, many times you'll go on and do that for 30, 40 years, be a great person, great doc, but ideas and innovations in medicine and creativity never got unlocked from here, because we conformed to who academic medicine said that we should be. And this is my last slide. When you become acquainted with thinking, you become a threat to power. And
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna stop sharing my screen, and then I'll take any questions that anybody has.
first of all, thank you so much for just being real and being very truthful. I think it's really refreshing. I think a lot of us have like these thoughts and we kind of see it going on, or we kind of can have some inkling. And then so to hear somebody just say it and kind of give words to it, really, it means a lot. One question I personally had is, when you want to do the diversity work, how do you navigate that and still advance? So if this is like, if that's what you want to do, you want to head the underserved clinic, you want to do those things, how do you do that and also still not get caught on this wheel?
So the first thing you have to do is you have to be specific about the diversity work. So if you notice in my title, diversity is not in my title at all.
Yeah.
Because I'm not interested in diversity. I'm interested in underrepresented minority faculty and students in academic medicine. So what you can do is you can decide what area, and in my opinion, and this is all Dr. Campbell over here, the I, just like I was telling y'all about URIM versus URMM, so it's like data. Whenever you have data in aggregate, you can learn some things, but there are individual sets in the data that get lost. And so the data that Mark Neve presented that ended up showing us that there were more Black men in medical school in 74 than it was in 2014 or so came because he disaggregated the data. You, as a diversity champion, you have to disaggregate where you want to fall in the diversity space. So I'm not doing inclusion things in the clinic or in the office, and I'm not having workshops and stuff. My work is specifically around scholarship, around underrepresented minority faculty and students, and trying to put content in the literature to help that group of professionals advance in academic medicine. And that's really kind of where I've kind of carved it out. So you got to figure that out. The other thing you got to figure out is you got to figure out when. And that's really important, because if you don't bookend this, it will consume you, because it hurts us. I mean, it hurts us to see the injustices and to want justice in our academic health centers. But you got to bookend it and figure out, okay, so I'm going to work on this project from January to April, or I'm going to work on it for just this summer, and bookend it, put some time frame on it. And then the third thing I would suggest that you do is you need a strong faculty advocate, you need a strong partner to kind of help you think about is what you want to, is what you're wanting to do even capable in that environment. Because you'll realize in some spaces, so for me, for example, about publishing stuff. So Kelly read my paper, but there's some people that I can present them data that say things about underrepresented minority faculty, and they won't believe it. I can show them the paper and they'll still not believe it. But somebody outside of my institution read this and will benefit from this. And that's one of the benefits of kind of how you share and you work that.
Are you able to see the chat now as well?
Yeah, but I might need help. We'll see.
It's okay. I can go ahead and say it. So we have a question, and it says, how do we support underrepresented minority faculty or strive for an upward progression without leaving other URMs behind and avoiding comparison trap?
So the first thing, what I told our students, I'll tell you what I told our students, especially now, given that we're talking about Black Lives Matter and this whole issue of race in America and social justice, is you need to lead with the data. So if you look at our class and you see 33% underrepresented minority, and you look at the faculty and you see 9, so you should go to your chairs and your deans and say, the medical school looks like the community, because the community for us is like, I know for African Americans like 22% or something like that. the medical school class looks like the community, but the faculty does not. And we want to see faculty who look like us. And we need for the institution to work to recruit faculty that look like us. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you guys can help us with, because I tell you, when students raise a concern, the institution is going to listen. Especially when those of you who are academic superstars, you know, whenever you raise a concern, then the administration is going to listen. So I would do that. In terms of the comparison trap, I don't think that there is a way to avoid that. But I will tell you, the URM faculty who get left behind will either be like me and just not be ignorant to the fact, or they'll choose to be left behind. So I had a colleague who was a pseudo leader and decided that this person wanted to be promoted. And I wrote this person a letter, and the dean said, I ain't promoting nobody that just writes in a chart. You know, so there comes a place where you as a faculty member, when you see these things or when you experience these things, you have to ask yourself the question, is something else going on here? And many times that'll be enough motivation to get people to begin to look into things.
I had a question. You can feel free to pass if you want to. So have you been like recruited, or are you being recruited by other medical institutions who, because most of them are struggling from a diversity of faculty, etc. I know that mine is. So I'm curious as to, now that you've made this shift, do you see, like, now that you're where you are, there still problems? Have you arrived? Like, is everyone coming knocking at your door with like offers?
So I don't think you ever arrive, but what happens is you begin to recognize what a promotion or advancement mindset is. So let me give you an example. So the answer is yes. So I get emails from places pretty frequently about opportunities. And you know what I do with them? I highlight the opportunity, and I compare my CV to the opportunity and see what it looks like. And I print the opportunity and I keep it in a file cabinet. And for jobs that I'm aspiring to, like I at some point, I hope to be a dean one day, I go and look for dean opportunities, and I highlight the qualifications, and I look at my CV and I say, okay, to be a dean, I need to do blah, 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 blah. I look at my CV. Okay, it ain't on there. So what do I need to do to try to check off that box so that when the time comes, if it's the right thing, then you make application. And that's the key, Ashley, is you want to remain a pluripotent stem cell as long as you can. Because if you ever differentiate and you hit a ceiling, you won't be able to lateralize into anything else, because some careers in medicine are cul-de-sacs. You end up in that place and there ain't no way up from there. And some folks are fine with that. And if you are, that's cool. That's cool.
I have a question. Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell, for this. This is amazing. Literally, I'm thinking about my decisions, as all of us are, and applying now. And I'm like, okay, well, now do I have to change my list up? Because I think it's really important, the place where we train, so that we can be well prepared and adequately prepared to go into academic medicine. So as we are kind of approaching this like medical journey, what would be some steps or some tips of advice for programs to look out for, or things we should kind of ask programs to see if they would be well suited for our training?
So one would be what kind of scholarship goes on in the program? So in a good way to check that out, you don't even have to ask no questions. If you look at the program faculty and you go to PubMed and you put their names in and you find out what's the last time that the program director, last time that some of the faculty have put something in the literature, that's a key thing to do that'll help you figure that out. But Janet, don't forget now, I did a community-based program. I ain't do nothing. I ain't check to see if nobody wrote nothing. I was in a community hospital. I ain't do none of that. And I ended up in an academic center, and it has worked well for me. So even if the program and where you end up may not seem to match, being armed with the knowledge of what to do will help you move forward. The other thing about programs is, does the program have an emphasis on what you're interested in, and does it have outcomes in that area? And what I mean by that, if you're interested in women's health, what are the outcomes when it comes to cesarean sections, or what are the outcomes as it relates to underserved populations and health disparities, if those things are important to you? It's really important to recognize that the program is not just going to be training you to be a physician in terms of your technical ability and your clinical knowledge, but that program is also going to will have had an impact on the community. And it's a matter of whether or not the program's interest and your interest align.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question along those lines, and I think you've kind of touched upon it. And the truth is, like, there's a couple of programs. I'm very interested in women's health, and there's just some that are just one in the middle of nowhere, because that's where a lot of the family OB programs are, and also they're lacking. I mean, my thing is kind of one, really figuring out if a program is putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to diversity. So a lot of these programs, they're lacking in diversity or inclusion, or however you want to do it, but have made active statements like, hey, we have realized this is a problem. We have an anti-racist committee. We're doing these are the steps that we're making. So how do you, let's say I go there, how do I make sure I'm not being put in like one of these false pseudo leaderships, or kind of having this emphasis on the diversity or the inclusion being on me? Because the truth is, I do want more Black people to come to this program, and I do want more diversity to come to this program, but at the same time, not trying to be an intern and, head the diversity fund or whatever.
Yeah. That's why you have to take the literature to them.
Okay.
And that's why we try to write this stuff, because you have to take the literature to them. They can't just say we have a racism committee. You have to take the literature to them, and there are key things that you have to have. And one of those things is you have to have time to develop into a physician. And they need to be able to communicate to you what their plan is for your talent development. So if you look at the whole thing, so the way I look at the diversity committee stuff, I don't like diversity committees. And the reason I don't is because I think that many times that diversity committees is where they hide the diversity power differential. So you go to the diversity committee, and on the diversity committee, the diversity is the staff and the students. The head of the committee, or the faculty and the senior leadership on the committee are all white men, or other folks. But it's a diversity committee because you got a few brown students on it, and you got some early career faculty. But the decision makers don't look like us, and committees tend to not have power. And it goes back to what I mentioned before. So power is the ability to direct budgets, to direct people, and the ability to build programming. Committees don't do any of those things. Deans do that. Department chairs do that. Senior level administrators do that. They're who do that. These committees don't do that. Now, granted, committees do great things, and I'm glad that they exist. But if you want change, The dean and the senior leadership, they're the ones that have to want it, and they're the ones that have to initiate it. And you want to make sure that in your negotiations that you have supported time for growth as a physician. And that's what you got to say. How does this institution plan to support my growth as a family medicine physician? And they should tell you some stuff, and then you take it and you go home with it and you read it and you study it and you look at it and you think about it and you call some people you know and you talk to them about it. And you can ask them, what kind of track record do you have in promoting minority physician success? And just say that and then listen to what they say. Because these are things that will let you know whether or not they have the capacity to not just teach you what you need to know clinically, but to also help you develop into a minority family physician.
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat the three things of power? You said directing budgets, organizing people, and what was the other one?
So hiring people.
Hiring people.
Yeah, directing budgets, and creating programs.
Creating programming.
Yeah, creating programs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and directing budgets or directing resources, however you want to. Somebody who can just say, you know what, I think I want to create a center for table chairs, and I think I'm going to do that. And here we go. I'm going to hire some staff. I got about $200,000 over here. I'm going to direct that money. I'm going to hire somebody to do it, and here we go.
So I'm at Wayne State. I don't know if that means anything to you and why I may have the questions that I have.
Oh no, I'm not familiar with Wayne State.
Oh, okay.
You know, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
Okay, great, thanks. It's in Detroit, Michigan.